And live from France, we have Veronique,
Yes.
which is awesome.
Lovely to see you, Paige.
Lovely to see you.
Last time you remember what was at IPNC in 2017?
I do.
We were celebrating 30 years. So we're way behind you.
Well, not way behind, but and your children were here. Do you have two kids or more than two?
I have three.
Three, so two.
But you're right, only two of them came with me that year. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I have three too. I don't know if you knew this, Brian, but Veronique is the only girl in her family of three brothers and one girl. And I'm the only girl in my family of three brothers and one girl. And now I know that you have three children and we have three children.
And do you have boys? How many boys or girls?
We have two boys and a girl.
I have two girls and a boy. So we almost. Because you're the second of the family. And
That's
I am
also
the second.
True.
Yes. Yeah.
So lots of similarities.
Yes.
And if I could speak French as well as you speak English, I'd really be going to town.
Then we could switch.
Then we could. Ooh, whoa.
You could come and have a little experience making wine here, and then
yeah, it might be the lost vintage if you actually had me do that.
No, I'm sure not.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Knudsen Vineyard 50th Anniversary Interview Series exploring the past, present, and the future of grape growing and winemaking in the Dundee Hills of Oregon. We kicked off this six-part series with Oregon wine pioneer Dick Erath back in March. Rollin Souls joined us in April, Allison and Alex Sokol-Blosser in May, and we are thrilled you've joined us today for episode 4. We're going to start in just a minute here, but first, I want to go over some brief housekeeping items. We are recording this interview, so it will be available as an episode on my podcast, Vintage, and as well as the KnudsenVineyards.com website. And you can check it out if you have to step away or come back later. Now, our conversation today will be about 40 to 45 minutes in length. The Q&A feature will be open during the time, and we encourage you to use it. Ask us all the questions you would like. We'll have about 10 minutes of questions and answers at the end. If you would like to join us in the chat, please do. Notice that you can select the audience for your comments before sending them. So you have the option of commenting to the entire audience or to just the panelists. So panelists will be keeping track of the questions submitted to the Q&A tab. And we won't be able to respond to the direct messages while we're doing the interview here. So share your comments with everyone instead so we can all be in on the fun. Now, I encourage you to pour yourself a glass of wine, and we hope you all enjoy a conversation we've been looking to for a long time now. This is number 4 in a 6-part series celebrating Knudsen Vineyard's 50th anniversary in the Willamette Valley, a series reflecting on the past, the present, and a little bit of insight as well into the future. And joining me today are Paige Knudsen Cowles, second-generation owner and managing partner at Knudsen Vineyards, and Véronique Boss-Drouhin, the fourth-generation winemaker at her family's domain in Burgundy, France. Halfway around the world from us, Maison Joseph Drouhin, and winemaker for the project here in Oregon, Domaine Drouhin Oregon. Before we welcome everyone officially, a little history about Maison Joseph Drouhin, which was founded back in 1880, has extensive holdings in all of Burgundy. And I had to brush up on my French a little bit here before we get into this segment. So hopefully I pronounce all of these vineyards right. 200 acres combined in Chablis, the Côte de Nuit, the Côte de Beaune, and the Côte Chalonnais. More than 2/3 are premier Grand Cru and Grand Cru sites, planted with the 2 hero grapes of Burgundy, of course, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Now, several of Maison Joseph Drouhin's vineyards are the most famous in all of Burgundy, such as the Clos de Mouchet, Montrachet Marquis de la Guiche, Musigny Clos de Vouget. Veronique, help me if I mess this up now.
Musigny, Clos de Vougeot, yes. You're doing good.
Corton-sur-la-Main, Maison Joseph Drouhin also acquires grapes from other vineyards and makes wines as a negotiant. Maison Joseph Drouhin wines are sold in over 80 countries around the world today. Now, Véronique grew up in Beaune. It's the heart of Burgundy, a beautiful town there. She decided on a winemaking career at a very early age, inspired by her family and also the small circle of women working in wine at the time. In the years since then, Véronique has become globally recognized for her work in Burgundy and in Oregon. She's made more than 30 vintages in each growing region and is considered an icon in both France and in Oregon. In fact, in 2019, she was awarded the Légion d'honneur France's highest award of merit. Today, Véronique continues to make every wine for Domaine Drouhin Oregon, the winery that the Drouhins established in the Willamette Valley back in 1987. In Burgundy, her title is Guardian of the Drouhin Palate, which makes her responsible for maintaining the Drouhin style and the sensibility in every wine the family produces. Paige and Véronique, thank you both for joining us here for Knudsen Vineyards' 50th anniversary. Really looking forward to learning more about the long history of Domaine Drouhin Oregon.
Thank you, Brian. It's just such a real pleasure to be here with you, but particularly with you, Véronique. Thank you for joining us.
My great pleasure. Thank you for having me, and happy birthday. How fabulous. I mean, this is extraordinary.
It's pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
we were all there at the time.
Well, Véronique, your family purchased back in 1987 100 acres in the Dundee Hills, and that was very important to the development of the Oregon wine industry, particularly back then. It really helped to establish Oregon's North Willamette Valley as a region capable of producing the highest quality Pinot Noir and, as we've learned, Chardonnay wines. Now, the area was still in its infancy back in 1987. Only 1,800 or so acres harvested of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the entire state. And by comparison, back then, there are 24,000 acres now of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay planted. What was it about the Willamette Valley that gave your father and you the confidence to make what was really a significant decision?
Well, I have to say that originally, my father didn't decide to come to Oregon. It just happened that a couple of good hazard, we would say, made it travel to the US to sell his wines from Burgundy. And he went to the West Coast to meet his distributor. And the man from California said, Robert, I'm going to take you on a beautiful drive to Oregon because there are lots of people who love wine in Oregon. And we should go and sell them Burgundy. So they went up that beautiful road and ended up in Oregon. And I'm talking, this is probably in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And so my father is there. And I think he probably at that time met with David Lett, probably Dickie Rass. And maybe they shared a couple bottles of wine. And then my father didn't think, oh, this is a fantastic region for Pinot, because probably at the time didn't even think that any day, someday he would make wine. But the time went by, and not that long later, there was this famous tasting in Paris, the Jugement de Paris, where obviously it was more focused on California Cabernet, winning a lot of the prize in France. But some people forget that it was also a Pinot class, and the Pinot from Oregon, from David Lett, as we know, did very well. And my father was not very happy with the result. So this tasting maybe was not very well organized, because David Lett Pinot came ranked 10th, but in a huge range of Pinot Noir. And so my father proposed to reorganize the tasting in Beaune with the Pinot that did the best at the tasting against his own wines. He didn't want to put anybody's wines in trouble. And so he did the tasting, and David Lett Pinot came second at the tasting. And there were a lot of, the panelists was extraordinary. There was a lot of great palates at the time. And so he realized, okay, this is not by chance. This is a very good wine. And I think that put seed in his head, but still he didn't decide that he's going to go and make wine in Oregon. Then I'm growing up, and I have to decide for a career. And I always said I would love to make wine, but when I was young, 3 brothers, 1 father, only boys working in company, or almost, I didn't think it was something I would do. But as you said, early on, I was encouraged by the family and by Laurence Jobard, who's been our winemaker for a long time. If you want to do this, you should. And so I did study knowledge in Dijon, and then you have to do stage, you have to do internship to go and learn. So I went to Bordeaux for the first time. And for the second stage that I had to do, I said to my father, I would love to go to the US. I would love to have the experience in California, because I didn't know about Oregon. And he was a close friend to Robert Mondavi. And he said, I'm sure Robert would take you, but if I were you, I would go to Oregon. So I looked at him and I said, why would I go to Oregon? I probably even asked, where is Oregon? And well, he said, and he told me the story. He said, I came across some really delicious wine from Oregon. Technically, maybe not always perfect, but I really think there's a great potential there. So I went to Oregon and I had the most extraordinary time with the Castile family from Heights, David Adelsheim and his family, and then David Lett and his family, which I thought was so nice because they did not know me. And so our distributor was selling their wines and they asked them if they would take, one of them would take a French girl. And they all said yes. How nice. So I spent a little time
And
with
if I can interrupt with that, and that was all in the same year. So you did these stages in the same
yes,
year?
this no, the one in Bordeaux was 84, 85 was in Burgundy, and this is 1986. So at the end of my stage, which was the harvest time, so let's say I was there from September to December, I think that's where there was a little of chit chat between my father and David Lett and David Lett. Who say, you know, Robert, maybe you would like to make wine here. And my father said, I would love to make wine here, but I don't have the time. I can't be in Burgundy and in Oregon. So thank you very much for proposing and for the idea, but it can't happen. And they didn't give up with the idea because of June 87. I remember David Lett, we were in Bordeaux for the Vinexpo exhibition, and David Alsan called my father and said, Robert, there's a beautiful piece of property next to David Lett's vineyards. Maybe you should come and see it. And so my father said, let's go. So this is July, and this is the first, he was invited to talk at the first IPMC. And so we go together, and David Alsheim takes us on the hill that goes up the hill to Delio. And there was nothing, there was just the big trees and the wheat had been planted. There was, of course, no vineyards and no winery. And I remember my father said, you know, if you are willing to make the wine here and spend the time, I believe in Oregon, and I think we should try. So I said, I agree. I think we should try. And I had no idea. I was very young. I was 24. I had no idea what I was suggesting or accepting. But anyway, of course, I have absolutely no regret. So it hasn't been that easy. It has been challenging, as you know, at the time. Communication was difficult. Equipment was difficult. But anyway, this was 30 years ago. You were there already, because I remember, I'm sure we'll talk about our fathers, of course, being together a lot and exchanging ideas. But Brian, to answer your question, this is the story of us being in Oregon. So I just feel like it has been events after events, which in the end took us there.
I love this story. This is so wonderful to hear. I've often said to people, I bet Veronique said to her father, Dad, you should come over here and check this out. But it sounds like he was the one who encouraged you to consider coming. And then you clearly were very open to the idea, which didn't necessarily have to be the case. So bravo to you.
Well, yeah.
My dad, Cal Knudsen, met with your father, Robert Drouhin, early in 1988 to discuss, and I don't know if you know this or not, to discuss a potential joint venture to develop a winery and utilize fruit from Knudsen vineyards until your newly planted vineyard commenced yielding estate fruit. And I have some letters that between the two of them, where they clearly had a conversation somewhere in Portland, I think, and then they responded, Dad proposed the idea, and then your father very graciously wrote a letter saying, thank you for the idea, but we've decided to do this without a partner. And do you recall the meeting that they had and the discussion of Domaine Drouhin Oregon's path forward?
I do recall the meeting. I was not at the meeting, but of course I remember my father, because I was going to be very involved in the project. So he kept me, and I really remember my father talking about your father. He said, I'm the most charming man, and he has the vision. I think we share the same passion, the same vision. We know all the efforts will be worth, even we don't know what the result will be, but I think it was clear that these two, I'm sure they could have worked together, but I think my father decided, okay, let's try to do it on our own. But I'm certain that the venture would have been also a success, because they both had this confidence, but integrity, and loyalty. And I would say the vision of, okay, let's do these things right, no rush. We should learn. So yeah, I remember.
Oh,
My dad.
that's nice. Yeah, our dad thought he just knew it was a complete game changer for Oregon when you and your family came to the Willamette Valley. So it was his ears perked up, and clearly he pursued your father to a certain extent. And for the first 2 or 3 years, you made wine from purchased fruit, and I know that some of it came from Knudsen vineyards, which we were delighted to provide. But from where else was the other fruit sourced?
Well, I have to say from Knudsen, it was for a long time. We bought
Oh.
fruit from Knudsen for a long time. Yes, because even when the vines from Didio started to produce, we continued to buy fruit, and we would drop little by little the one that we liked the least. But with Knudsen, the one was always very, very good. And then Didio produced enough. But the other suppliers were, I remember the very first time we had 6, I think, Canary Hill, Seven Springs, Bethel Heights, who else did we buy fruit from? And we Laurel Ridge also.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's funny because the first, maybe it was your fruit that arrived first, because 88 is the first vintage. And I remember that moment where the first fruit arrived at this little storage room we found to make wine, because we didn't have a winery. So it was very difficult because it had no water, no electricity. So we had to plug stuff. But I remember that first day the fruit arrived, my father said, well, we need to celebrate this moment. And he took a bottle of Chambol Musigny Premier Cru, and he said, we need to toast to these grapes. We are not going to copy, it's Pinot Noir, but we won't copy Burgundy, but we should be inspired by the style of what we like to produce. And it could have been, I wouldn't know, I can let you know later. I don't have my book, but I kept all my books from every vintage at Didio. And I do have exactly the order of when the fruit and the bricks and so on.
Well, I know you're a busy person, but if you had a moment, I'd love to hear about that. That would be really terrific to know.
Yeah, absolutely, with pleasure.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Well, Veronique, kind of fast forward a little bit here. The Eola Amity Hills outside of Salem, I know you've got a special description for that area. I want you to share that with us and maybe compare and contrast the wines that come from the Dundee Hills with those from Rose Rock Vineyard in the Eola Amity Hills. How are they different?
They are different. We had been buying fruit from the Eola Hills through Bethel Heights and Seven Springs. So we had been working with those fruits, and it was clear every year. At the beginning, we didn't know if it was the vintage or if it was the clone that had been planted that made the difference. But it became very clear quickly that it was not that only, maybe that partly, but the soil had to do and the climate had to do. And what the way I put it is, to me, the Dundee Hills make very delicate, soft, soyeux, silky wines, and the ones from Eola are a little more structured, a little more dark color, very fruity. Both of them great wines, and I think it's fabulous that we have this terroir. This is how we call the difference here between little locations of the vineyards, and I think it's great because we are learning still. But now there is, because of that, there is all the AVAs we have in Oregon, and the reason they do exist is because there are differences between the region. And the Eola is a little bit cooler. We have the Ventoso corridor, so the air flows and the grapes ripen a little bit later. The soil has very good drainage, and so it's a site that can be drought sensitive, so we have to be a bit careful with that also. So there are very interesting differences, but I call it my Chambol Musigny and my Gevrey Chambertin sites.
That's very good. And what would you say in terms of the amount of wine you produce from each? Are they about equal, or is one producing more than the other?
It's about equal in size. Both properties are 45 hectares, so sorry, it's in hectares, but 45 hectares of Pinot and about 5 of Chardonnay. Mm-hmm. We bought Rose Rock in 2013, so it was a more recent adventure for us with Rose Rock than Didio, which is started in 88. But the production of Rose Rock is at the moment a little bit smaller because we don't use all of the Pinot from Rose Rock in the blend of Rose Rock.
Mhm.
I only have 2 cuvées from Rose Rock. I have 4 at DDO. They're very small, but because at DDO I have a little bit more knowledge
Yes.
of the places. I'm
Mhm.
sure it's the same for you. So there's a few blocks that are my little chouchou, I would say now.
Shoo, shoo. I love that. My little cabbage. That's the translation, as I recall. You in DDO, its owned acreage in the acreage you own in Oregon is now greater than all of your holdings in France, with 2 large parcels, just as you've described in Oregon, versus many smaller parcels in France. And I suspect that the 2 vineyard sites and larger holdings in Oregon allow for greater economies of scale in viticulture compared to France. And first of all, is that correct? And then how does that affect your business here in the US?
Well, I have to say, yes, the estate in Oregon is larger than the one in Burgundy, but the one in Burgundy is quite large for Burgundy's size,
Mm-hmm.
for Burgundy standards. We have 80 hectares, and I would say 80 hectares in Burgundy is large. The average here would be 12 hectares.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, we also are a négociant, meaning we buy grapes from growers. So if you sum up the production of Burgundy, it's actually 3 or 4 times larger, maybe even more than Oregon. So on the scale, we're still much bigger in Burgundy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But to come back to your question, what has been very interesting is at some point I realized that there was Domaine Drouhin Oregon wine, and a lot of the customers of these wines had no idea we were producing wine in Burgundy. So I would meet people say, "Really? You also make wine in France?"
Oh my
And
goodness.
so both wines have been helping each other, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, of course, the Oregon wine was making people aware of the Burgundy existence, and then, of course, more often than the beginning, it was the opposite. And I think there was a synergy working well with people wanting to try both wines made by the same family on 2 different soil. So that has
No,
been,
that's great to hear, because one might suspect that there might be some competition between the 2, the Oregon wines and the Burgundy. So it's really great to hear that there's, as you say, synergy between the 2.
yeah, no, there's synergy. I wouldn't say there's competition. I think Oregon has a great future. Of course, at the beginning, it has been just in the US. We were selling the wine, which was hard enough to do because people, as you know, it was difficult at the beginning. People did not know. So you really had to travel, show the bottle, have people taste the wine. And once they tasted, they said, wow, this is really serious and good. But it took time. It took a long time to
Mm-hmm.
build a reputation. And I think the strength of Oregon, that is, we all did that together at the same time. And so traveling all over the US really put Oregon on the map more quickly. So I think
Yes.
everyone owes a bravo, because yeah, we all worked
No,
hard
no,
to
to
do
your
that.
point, we had the true point of view that you couldn't talk just about your own vineyard. You had to talk about Oregon first before you could talk about your own vineyard, because most
Yeah,
people didn't know where Oregon was.
yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
I think it was pronounced Oregon back then.
That's right, Oregon.
Well, we have Véronique Drouhin joining us from Beaune. We've got, gosh, folks in Connecticut, New York City. I hear it's pretty hot, 96 degrees in
Mhm.
Wisconsin. So we've got folks tuned in from all across the country and all around the world today. And I want to ask you, Veronique, the logistics. It's one thing to have one winery with several different varietals and fruit coming in and all that stuff. You do it, on 2 continents with harvest about the same time. How do you manage that?
It hasn't been easy, but I would say the most difficult part has been for the kids, for my children, because I haven't been moving them with me every vintage. I have to say I'm very lucky that in France, I'm working with a great team, and we have a head enologist, the technical director, winemaker, you would say, of Burgundy is Jérôme Forbrac. And so Jérôme is really leading the winemaking. If I am in Beaune, until I have to go to Oregon, which normally we always start Burgundy a bit before we start Oregon. So I will be with him as long as I can, tasting with him, making the decision. But when I leave, I still have my father, my brothers who are there and do the same, taste with him. It's just more comfortable to be 2, but so it's manageable because there's a team. Oregon is different because we have an assistant, Erin, who is fantastic. But it's again, it's nice to be together, to be contacting the harvest. So the priority for me has always been Oregon. When I have to go, I would leave. And this year, interesting, because I think this year we will pick in Oregon before we will start Burgundy. I think it's rare, but I think they sell.
And I think when we were talking before the call, I suspect that's because the conditions in France have been so different this year, not so much that they're so different in Oregon this year.
Right, yes, it's more us that have been different because of that episode that caused the reason we will pick probably on a long period of time is because of the frost, because the vine has started to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Then the frost healed those little vines the buds that grow. Then the second bud come, but that took another 3 weeks, so it's delayed by a couple of weeks, at least for the Chardonnay. The Pinot will be more normal, but the Chardonnay is going to be behind.
It is so fascinating to hear you talk about all of your winemaking strengths and how your team is organized. When you trained and ultimately received an advanced degree in enology from the University of Dijon, you were the only woman in your class of 22. What was your experience like there, and how did it prepare you to become the guardian of the Drouhin style? And how is that style evidenced at Domaine Drouhin Oregon?
It was really easy for me and didn't make much difference. It was 22 of us in the class, but as I said, I have 3 brothers, so I was always, which had friends coming over. So being with boys was always normal to me. And so, and the class was, everyone was so nice with me. So I really didn't feel any time that it was a bit tough, or that maybe I had regret that maybe that was not for me, because I always got a lot of encouragement. Now, what I would say is, yes, you do learn the basics when you study the winemaking, and being in Dijon was very nice and very good. But I would say it's more afterwards that you learn by, and especially in Burgundy, it takes time because we have so many different, I mean, it's 2 varieties, which is easy, like in Oregon, but we have so many different vineyards, village and premier cru, and all these appellations. Burgundy has 1,247. You could make ultimately 1,247 different wines if you owned a little bit of each of them. And of course, nobody knows them all, but it does take time. So that's what I'm training with my daughter Lorraine now, is really by tasting and tasting over and talking to the older people, talking to like my father or your generation who is doing the same. So it's a lot of oral transmission. You learn a lot by talking, but also by practice. And that has been, and I would say still is a learning curve, because I still discover new vineyard that I didn't know, or a vintage that I didn't know so well before. I would say I know them well because my father was very smart and very kind to share with us a lot of old wines that he had in the cellar, making us guess. I'd say, okay, kids, we're going to try and guess what this one is. We put the cork in his pocket, hide it, and we would be wrong most of the time, but sometimes we would find what village it was or what appellation it was exactly. And then we would need to try and guess the vintage. And again, he would explain, well, that year was a bit cold, so you might see a bit of acidity here. So give us little tips. So I know well the vintage back, I would say, to 1959, and then a lot of them before that, because I've been lucky to taste some of those vintages, which is very interesting for now. So it's using a lot of the past, but you don't reinvent anything when you make wine. You just try to do the best every year with what you have. But
and do you find it's the way, you must have an amazing memory? What is your technique for remembering all these things? Do you write a bunch of notes in a book, or do you have a way that you think about it?
I think my memory was really good when we did that, and and it's just there because I admire a musician who can play a whole concerto by heart, and I've been playing music and I'm really bad at that. And if I don't have the music with me, I'm terrible. So I don't think my memory is that good, but maybe when it's really interesting to you, you do remember. And I think when you are young, you remember better, and when it's there, it stays there.
I was wondering when you were talking whether technology might be a help to, what's the word, to capture the oral tradition that you're talking about. Does anybody record anybody talking in France or in Oregon, or is that anything you've thought about?
Yeah, well, recently we at the in the family, because our father would constantly tell us about anecdotes or things that happened or things he tried, things that worked or didn't work. And one day we said, Dad, we will remember most of it, but not all of it. And there might be things you won't think of telling us. So you should please either write or dictate, which he has been doing to his assistant. So, which is nice, because even the other day he was telling us a couple of the anecdotes, and we said, never heard of this before. And so that's great. But on the larger scale, Burgundy has just started to do a thing called Parole de Vigneron. So we're words from the vigneron, words from the growers. And I think Oregon has been doing the same at Linfield College.
Yes.
So it's a very similar thing where you try to get before they disappear, the témoignages and the witnesses of people who've been making wine for so long. So it's so precious and such a good idea. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Véronique, it's been a couple of years. I think back in 2019, you received the Légion d'honneur from your home country. So congratulations on that. What does that award acknowledge and signify, and how did it feel to receive that?
Well, honestly, it was a surprise. You never know when you are going to get it, but I think it's like the lotteries, like the things it's never going to be happening to me. And there I am. I got a little text from someone who said congratulations, and I said, for what? And he said, well, you've been awarded the Légion d'honneur. I said, what? Because someone will ask for you, and then there's a whole process without you knowing that goes on. But anyway, the Légion d'honneur is when it was created by Napoleon. This was to reward. It was more military reward for people who had been showing a lot, I guess, of courage. And then it was extended to not just the military people, but for someone who has contributed to do something for the country or helped on a cause. Or there's a lot of different. You could be in farming. Mine was from the farming, growing field, but it could be for artist or musician, or it's just. I think it's a reward that say thank you for what you've been doing. So for us, maybe it was the fact that the family has been trying to be an ambassador of, I would say, both Burgundy, also Oregon, although I don't know for the Légion d'honneur that they consider the Oregon part, but being an ambassador and traveling a lot to promote your product outside of your country. And wine is important. You know, France is the second largest income to the country after Airbus. So it's very important for France. That's interesting.
That's great. Well, and you may remember that my father was inducted into the Chevalier de Testament in 1971. And then you and I saw each other in 2017 when I asked to have my induction into the same society over at the Clos de Vougeot. It was really, really very meaningful to me to be there. And then to see you there was great.
Yeah, I know it's great. And I mean, to become a member of the confrérie, for your father to become a member of the confrérie, he really, it's like, I would say, it's almost like the Légion d'honneur. They do it for a reason. And then I'm sure it's the same for your father. He was a visionary for Oregon, for wine in general. I'm sure he loved Burgundy, because they wouldn't give someone who didn't like Burgundy wines, because they want people to become sort of ambassador of the region. So it's a big honor. It's the oldest wine brotherhood in the world.
Oh, I didn't know
also
that.
The most well-known, yes. It's and still very active. Yeah.
I've hung my certificate just below his certificate in my office. And what I love about it is in 1971, it's exactly the same as what they give people in 2017, exactly the same background. It's really great.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wonder, you talked about your children and one of your, I think your daughters working with you about her palate and wines. Is the fifth generation of the Drouhin family interested in becoming active in the business? And then how have you managed that conversations with members of that generation? Is it family meetings? Is it dinner table conversations? Is it formal, informal? All of the above?
I don't know exactly what made one of them. So one from, we call them the G5. I'm the G4. My dad is G5, but the G5 is seven of them. So my brother's children and my children. So that's 7 kids. And at the moment, Lorraine, so my oldest daughter, and she's the oldest of that generation, decided to join us officially last October. So we are really, really excited. But I have to say, when she was 18, and she's 28, she was born in 92, so she's 28 now. And when she was 18, 20, she said, oh no, I'm not going to do this. She said, Mom, you work all the time. We never see you. And no, 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 I'm not going to do this. Although I like the wine, I like it, but and then so she went to do business studies, and then one day she said, you know, I would love to make wine with you in Oregon, just to help, be a
Oh,
helper.
sweet.
I said, sure, come. So
Mhm.
this was 2017. And then she got an internship to work for Ruina Champagne, and then another one for Krug Champagne. And I think that's where she got the bug, because she came back and we said, well, then you have to decide. She was looking for a job, but I had to decide if you go to the technical side or you stay in the marketing. And she said, I really, really liked to taste and to talk to the chef de cave and to the vigneron. And so she went back to school when she was back in
Uh-huh.
Beaune to the Lycée Viticole to study about winemaking and viticulture. And that was a 2-year program. And at the end of the 2-year program, where she was half in school and half with us, she said, I am in. I just love it. And
That's so great.
she has very, very good predisposition for tasting. She has a very, very good palate. So, but she's very aware that there's a lot of work for her to learn, like we did. But we spend a lot of time. So it's fun. It's great. And she's helping me on a lot of things, technical stuff that I don't know. So it's great. It's really both ways.
That's great. And any other of the G5 interested? There's so many aspects to the wine business beyond just winemaking. Anybody interested in the business or in marketing or in distribution?
Yeah, well, the others are still young. Two of my nephews live in the US because one of my brother, Laurent, lives in New York, and two of the children are, and his two kids are um, at the moment. I would think maybe his daughter, she might embrace the business and but more what my brother-in-law is doing, the ambassador side, so the tastings and meet the customers. She's very, and of course she's perfect bilingual, and she really likes it because at my generation, my brother Philippe, who he and I share the duties in Oregon for viticulture and enology, is really in charge of the viticulture. But Philippe is not the person that loves to be sent out on the market. He really doesn't enjoy that. And Laurent loves it. So it's just perfect because each of us found something that we're comfortable in doing. So maybe Aurore could do that. And then Frédéric has one kid who did study the sommellerie. He's becoming a sommelier and is currently working at a wine store in the south of France. So, it's good. I think it's very good. They have their own experience, and maybe a couple of years they might say, we'll come and help you. We'll
Yes,
see.
no, I love hearing that how you've thought about it and how people are responding. My father had 8 grandchildren, and one of my brother Colin's sons went to the Cornell School of Viticulture and Enology for 4 years in that program. And he similarly is working for a different business in the Seattle area and has gotten a really terrific overview of all the different ways you can participate in the wine business. So we have a little hope here and there.
It's exciting. This is
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, congratulations. It's
Thank you.
great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Unlike
Yeah.
you, I'm just G2, so I'm just a little twerp compared to
Well,
you.
but that doesn't matter. And what is important is you shouldn't be pushed to do these things, and you shouldn't be asked to do these things. So it's the decision, their decision. But when
Yes.
you decide, it's nice.
It's
Yeah.
pretty nice.
That's a great lead into my next question. We have two prominent women leaders of Oregon vineyard and winery businesses here. So what's the future look like for the wine industry in Oregon and specifically maybe the Dundee Hills? Véronique, maybe start with you.
Well, I think Oregon in general has a great future. We can see a lot of people knocking on the door that even 5 years ago did know that the wines that exist in Oregon, but were not interested. And now say, can we try them? And so I think we've been working a lot on the U.S. market, and I think the export has been the next step. And and I think Oregon very, very soon is already exporting, but I think that will increase because also the production of Pinot is not that big if you think of the scale of the world. So it's great, and Oregon is not that big either. So I think it's great future. And for Dundee already has a fantastic reputation. And what is very nice is everyone being in the Dundee Hills is concerned about keeping that reputation. So the goal is to produce great wines, and there's no cutting corners. And I think that's great. It's not just Dundee. I think everyone in the AV is shooting for the same target. But we are very lucky that it started in the Dundee Hills with David Lett, and the Pinot from that area being year after year stunning. So I'm super excited about the future of Oregon. I don't know, Paige, what you think?
Oh, I think very much the same. We feel so lucky to have inherited this beautiful piece of property and stewarding it for the next generation. My sense is that more and more people across the US and in other countries are going to recognize that Oregon produces world-class wines, and we're going to see more visitation. And I would think, you know, with COVID notwithstanding, we're already seeing, and perhaps you are at DDO, more people just coming out to the tasting room. We had double our projected visitation in May, and I think that's going to be the same going forward. I think what's going to happen in Dundee is we're going to have to really think about how we're going to accommodate all the people who come. We're a little bit, need to do a little bit more development in terms of places people can stay, places people can eat, but I think there's a lot of interest in that as well. And then I'd be interested in your point of view, Véronique, about the opportunities for women in the wine business. My sense is that it's just opening much more than it used to be, but you've been more involved in the actual business of winemaking. What's your thought?
Well, I think for women, it's really increasing very, very rapidly. There's women at every position, every level, and doing great. So, and I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm pushing for that. I mean, if it's, when we hire someone, if it's a girl, great. Our chef de cave is a woman, the person in charge of the lab is a woman, or a winemaker is a man. Before it was a woman. So we don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
But then for us, there's no difference. So, but I think now it's set. Even here, Burgundy was really way behind that. Like in the past, no. The daughters were not encouraged to do that. I think my father was
Yes.
like yours. They were very encouraging.
Yes, very
Great.
encouraging. I agree. Yep. Oh, I had something I wanted to ask you, and then it's just gone right out of my head.
No,
So
I was going to say one thing, Paige, about Dundee becoming an Oregon Gel more famous. I think we have to stay true to who we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to have all these people coming and visit, but I think we need to be able to still take the same care as we do and see people and explain, because they come to taste the wine and to learn, and it's great. It's always great to educate people, but I think we will need to be careful to handle that growth in a smart way, not become too crazy. I don't know.
And you have a lot of good experience with your family that way. We have an excellent Oregon wine board that helps direct those conversations. In Dundee, particularly, we have a very strong Dundee Hills Wine Growers Association that keeps the conversation going amongst the people in the Dundee Hills. And you know, the other thing is, in Oregon, we have only a certain amount of land to plant the grapes, and then they're not making it anymore. So, you know, I think, oh, I know what I was going to ask you. There's been a lot more interest from the French in coming to Oregon. Were you aware of any of it in advance? For example, the Champagne Bollinger just acquiring the Ponzi estate, and Henriot, I think, was Beaufrère, and Louis Jadot with the Resonance Vineyard. Is that a conversation in France that kind of goes on, or do you learn about it in the papers the way we do?
I didn't learn it in the papers, but I did not know in advance that they were looking. But they've been very nice, almost all of them, to give me a call or send me a little message and said, I would like you to know before you read it in the newspaper. And Bollinger was the last one. And Etienne Bizot very kindly sent me a little message and said, I would like you to know. And he did the same to Pierre-Henri Gaget from Louis Jadot, saying, before you read it in the newspaper, we've been very happy. So I think it's exciting, but I think you're right. There's more. I know there's more French people interested in coming to Oregon. Not just the French. I think Oregon is really going to be. I'm hoping that won't raise the prices of land too crazy like it has been in Burgundy, crazy nowadays, and even us almost can't afford to buy any more vineyards. It's just investors can, because it's too expensive. So I'm hoping we will stay reasonable in that. But of course, it's going to be more demand. The prices will go up.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, thank you again, Paige and Veronique. We hope you'll join us again next time for the 5th installment of the Knudsen Vineyards 50th anniversary series. Next time, Paige and I will be joined by Alan Holstein, a leading viticulturist in the Oregon wine industry, and his son Jackson, carrying on the family's legacy as the winemaker and proprietor with his wife Isla of Granville Wine Company. So mark your calendars, Tuesday, July 13th, 5 p.m. Pacific time. We'll talk to Alan and Jackson from their vineyard and winery in the Dundee Hills. You can register for that event on Knudsen Vineyards website, knudsenvineyards.com. Thank you so much for sharing your afternoon or your evening with us, depending on where you are. And
Right.
Nice to spend time with you. We hope you're staying safe and healthy, and we sure look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Veronique, it has been such a pleasure to have you. I've been so excited for this conversation. And when will we see you in Oregon again?
As soon as I'm allowed to travel to the US, because at the moment we are not allowed to come to the US. You can come to Europe, I think, but hopefully very soon. And as soon as I can come, I'll be there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully for the harvest, that will be
great.
Should be fine for the harvest, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Merci mille fois.
Merci. Thank you very much for having me. Happy birthday and all the best to you and the whole family. And thank you for everything you've been doing in Oregon. It's great. And Brian, thank you very much for your enthusiasm and very good questions.
Great to see you again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. Merci, Veronique.
Merci à vous.
À bientôt. À bientôt.
À bientôt. Oui, à bientôt.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.